Okay, today I'm going to present another study which shows that fertile women are very different in their behaviours from non-fertile women. I'm going to show you that fertile women dehumanize and intersexually compete with other women at a much higher rate than people who are using hormonal contraceptives or who are non-fertile. Those are the data that I'm going to show you. What I want you to think about whilst I'm telling you this is how this relates to society and our interactions with one another. So, prior literature in this field has shown us a lot around how female fertility affects jealousy, mate guarding, the colour that you might wear on a certain day, you're more likely to wear red or pink, the different clothes that you'll buy in a store, all sorts of things like that. However, more recent studies in the past decade have shown really interesting correlations between fertility and dehumanization. Originally, this came around from studies of attractiveness and how attractive another person was, and how likely you were to dehumanize them, or how close you were to them, how likely you were to dehumanize them. But this study builds on all of those, showing that actually intrinsic factors, not extrinsic factors, are some key differences between dehumanization and sexual competition. So dehumanization is the removal of human essence. It's saying someone else doesn't have human morality. It's seeing them as a lack of agency. It's seeing them without complex human emotions, and really casting them to a lower social order or human order in society. It's been correlated with war, with slavery, and with rampant abuse throughout centuries. So I think you can understand how this paper is pretty relevant even today. Intersexual competition, by comparison, is competition between two members of the same sex. Traditionally, this was over food or water or protection. Nowadays, it's more of a jobs, promotions, interviews, clothes, cars, mansions, that sort of thing. So the key hypothesis that these authors were trying to discover, that these authors were trying to sort out, was that fertile women are more likely to dehumanize and intersexually compete with other women than people who are non-fertile, people using hormonal contraceptives. So how do they do this? In Italy, at the University of Trieste, they recruited 125 different women, and in study 1 they used 66 and 59 in study 2. We're not going to really focus on study 1, it was really interesting, but it was more of a preliminary study. The findings of study 1 were fascinating, in that they showed that women dehumanize other women, not men, and not elderly people. Study 2, however, is where we're going to focus most of our energy. So in study 2, there were 38 out of those 59 were normally ovulating women, or NOWs, and 21 were using hormonal contraceptives. How do we measure dehumanization? It's actually a relatively standardized, normally used measure, whereby we take those 20 words you saw on the first title slide, and we ask women, using these 10 animal words like half-breed, species, or wild, using these 10 human-related words like ethnicity, culture, or human, to choose 8 to 10 words from this list of 20 and characterize a photo using them. The women were presented with 3 photos of the elderly, of men, and of women. So that's how we measure dehumanization, that frequency of which they characterize these using animal or human words. Intersexual competition, by comparison, is often measured using the intersexual competition scale, which was pioneered by Bunke and Fisher in 2007. It's a 12-point scale with different statements, and women rate from 0 to 7 how much they agree or align with those statements. A couple of examples, and I want to show you all 12, is that I wouldn't hire a very attractive woman as a colleague, or I tend to look for negative characteristics in highly successful women, or I wouldn't hire a highly competent woman as a colleague, or I don't like seeing other women with nicer cars or houses than mine. So evidence sexism. So we've measured dehumanization, and we've seen how we can measure intersexual competitiveness, but fertility is another measure that you're going to see, and you're going to need to understand this study. So they use a measure called conception risk. How they figured this out was they asked women to report the end of their last cycle and the beginning of their next cycle. Then they suggested that it's probably a standard 28-day cycle, so we're going to take slap bang in the middle, day 14. That's probably when women, as shown by previous studies, are most fertile. This is peak fertility, and just a few days before equally is pretty fertile as well. Then they normalized it on a scale from -1 to 1, such that if you're highly fertile, you're very close to day 14, then you have a higher risk of conception. If you're a long way away from day 14, then much lower risk of conception, you're less fertile. So this is a conception risk you're going to see. Good question, how do you measure conception risk in someone who's taking hormonal contraceptives and can't conceive? Well, it's by realizing that hormonal contraception isn't really binary, it's not on or off. It's really a fluctuating chemical treatment of increasing and decreasing activity, such that most women do still experience menstruation and menstrual bleeding during that withdrawal period that you have on placebo pills somewhere towards the end of the cycle. Okay, so that's how they measure fertility, dehumanization, and intersexual competition. So here's some results. Animal words on the y-axis and human words on this y-axis. Notice the difference in the scales, that fewer animal words than human words, as you'd expect, because they're characterizing human subjects. Okay? Conception risk from -1 to 1, so very lowly fertile, more higher risk of conception. And in blue is going to be normally ovulating women. Watch the blue line. High conception risk significantly correlates to an increase in the way you describe a woman as an animal. Watch the blue line again. Higher conception risk means that you're more likely less likely to describe a woman as a human. You might find the hormonal contraceptive users information interesting as well. I will preface that whilst these trends aren't actually significant, you might as well consider them as a flat line if you want to. They are significantly different from those of normally ovulating women. And it's really kind of curious to notice the slants are exactly opposite. So this is dehumanization. Conception risk directly correlates to dehumanization. Intersexual competitiveness, so on intersexual competition, how you're not going to hire that highly competent woman is now on the y-axis, and on the x-axis again, conception risk. In blue and red, as you can see at the top, normally ovulating women and hormonal contraceptive users. Which the blue line, conception risk highly correlates with intersexual competition. Or you saying, I'm not going to give a job to a very attractive female rival. For hormonal contraceptive users, again the same trend. No significant difference in that, but very different from the normally ovulating women. So how does this kind of play into the patchwork of different literature that's been had in the past? Actually really well, which is why I chose this study. It really, I see it as a capstone of a multitude of different studies which have been presenting data on fertility and jealousy, on mate guarding, and a bunch of different things surrounding that, including this 2016 study, which shows that when you're non-fertile and another woman is fertile, you are far less likely to distribute resources to them. Or this 2011 study, which shows that when you're fertile, you're far more jealous than when you're non-fertile. We can talk about the hormonal contraception kind of outlier here later, but the general trend across a number of studies in the literature in this area are pretty consistent. So critiques I had of this paper, I had quite a few. There was no animal control. So think about it, they compared different groups of humans. They never asked you to base that on a baseline of, wow, what's a lemur compare to that. Equally, they didn't use a hormonal contraception control. So they knew that women were taking hormonal contraceptives. They didn't know what compounds they were using, or in what doses and how regularly. They used 20 subjective words. I mean, religious, political, educational, age, relationship differences, and cultural differences could all color the way that you interpret these different words and attribute them and characterize other photos. So it's not the most precise measure, however, it is standardly done. The biggest issue I had, however, was that this study is between subjects, not within subjects. Between subjects is taking me when I'm fertile, you when you're non-fertile, and someone else when they're using hormonal contraceptives and comparing the three of us. Within subjects, however, removes that bias by taking me at a stage when I'm fertile, me at a stage when I'm non-fertile, and me at a stage when I'm using hormonal contraceptives, and then comparing those differences as an individual. That removes any bias for outside political or contextual differences, and really make sure that this is a far more significant relevant study. So, from a human evolutionary biology perspective, you can quite easily see that it may make more sense for women to treat others as rivals rather than cooperatives or allies, if you're trying to seek a mate when you're most fertile. But think about it from a society point of view. Can you imagine the incredible effects that this must have on the workplace, on employment, on job interviews, on provision of healthcare, on education, on law and order, anything like that? I think this study pretty much shows that we have a lot more work to do in human sexuality, and we're more mammalian before we're metrosexual. Thank you.